Your AI coding agent just built the wrong thing again. Maybe it misunderstood the requirements, maybe it ignored your coding standards, or maybe it built something that kind of works, but looks nothing like how you would have built it. Sound familiar? Here's the thing. Whether you're using Claude Code or Cursor or whatever new tool drops next week, our coding agents are capable of so much more. We have these incredibly powerful tools at our fingertips, but we're barely scratching the surface of what they can help us build. The problem is we're not giving them what they need to think like we think. We're not teaching them our standards, our patterns, our way of building. And without that context, even the most advanced AI models are just guessing at what we want. That's where spec-driven development comes in. It's the difference between an agent that frustrates you and one that feels like you're working with a senior developer on your team. In this video, I'll show you exactly how spec-driven development works and why it's becoming the standard for professional teams using AI. And I'll introduce you to Agent OS. It's a free open source system I built that teaches your agents how to think like you think and build like you build. It's completely customizable to your standards and workflow, and it works with any AI coding tool that you're already using. So today I'll unpack all of this with real examples so that you can adopt this approach and fix your agent's success rate for good. Now, right now, most developers are stuck in prompt engineering mode. We write a detailed prompt for every feature, we point our agent to the right files, and then we over-explain what we want again and again. And sure, we're getting better at this. Tools like Cursor made it easier, and then Claude Code came along with its Claude MD file for basic context. We're getting more efficient. But here's the thing. Even with perfect prompts, our agents still don't think like a senior developer on our team. They don't know our patterns, our standards, or why we make the decisions that we make. Think about it. When you onboard a new developer to your team, you don't just give them a feature request and tell them to get to work. You show them how your team works. You explain your architecture decisions. You share your coding standards and your best practices. That's exactly what spec-driven development does for your AI agents. Instead of prompting them like tools, we train them like teammates. We give them the context they need to build the right way, your way, from the start. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like a lot of documentation work, right? But here's the thing. The system that I'm about to show you handles the heavy lifting for you. So you still guide the standards and oversee the process without needing to write novels of documentation. So how do we give agents all of that context? Through specifications. It's a pattern we're already seeing in the industry. Here's what Sean Grove from OpenAI said last week about the future of software development.
And so moving forward, the new scarce skill is writing specifications that fully capture the intent and values. And whoever masters that becomes the most valuable programmer. And there's a reasonable chance that this is going to be the coders of today. This is already very similar to what we do. However, product managers also write specifications.
So writing great specs is our superpower as developers. It's the value that we bring into the process of building with AI. So let me show you how we put this into practice. It's why I built Agent OS, a free open source system that gives your agents the same context and knowledge as a senior developer on your team. 3 things make Agent OS different. First, it uses a 3-layered context system that captures everything from your coding standards to your product vision. So your agents actually understand the how and why behind what you're building. Second, it replaces constant prompting with structured workflows. Your agents plan their own work with your oversight instead of waiting for instructions at every step. And third, it's completely yours to customize. No rigid templates or lock-in. Use it with Claude Code or Cursor or any AI tool that you're working with. Adapt it to your style and refine it so that it gets better over time. Now remember, the whole point of spec-driven development is for our agents to get it right the first time, not the 5th time. So Agent OS makes this happen by establishing 3 layers of context. First are your standards. That's how you build software in general. It's your tech stack, your code style, your best practices. The next layer is your product, what you're building and why. Your mission, who it's for, your roadmap. And the third layer are your specs, all feature requirements that guide implementation. Each layer builds on the last so that your agent gets the full picture. So let's go ahead and get Agent OS installed, and I'll show you exactly how this works in a real project. So I'm going to head over to Builder Methods. Under Resources, I can go to Agent OS. That's at buildermethods.com/agentos. And this page has everything for Agent OS, So if I scroll down to here, I can get to the project on GitHub, and I can get to all of the docs and the setup instructions right here. But you'll want to go down to installation. Now, installing Agent OS is a two-step process. We've got the base installation and then a tool-specific setup. So we're going to start with the base installation first. And it's as easy as using this one-line curl command to run an installer script. And I'm going to do that in just a second. If you want to see what that script does, you'll have all that info right here, but I'm going to show you in just a second. Or if you prefer a manual installation, you can follow the instructions in here and just copy the files from the GitHub repo onto your system. But let's go ahead and just copy that one-liner. And I'm in Terminal here. By the way, I'm also viewing my home folder. So, on a Mac, you can go to Home, and that gets you to your home folder. Mine uses my name, and I have hidden folders shown there. Anyway, that's opened up in Cursor so that we can see it. And here's my terminal. So I'm going to copy this script from there, just drop it in, and let's run it. So it shows you everything that it did. And you'll notice that in the home folder, we now have this Agent OS folder. We'll open that up, and inside that we have instructions and standards. Now you might be wondering, why did we install this into a folder called Agent OS instead of installing these instructions into the Claude folder or in the Cursor rules folder? We're going to do both of those. So we're going to keep the Agent OS instructions and standards centralized in one place, and we can refer to them using whichever tool we're using for agentic coding. Now we're going to unpack this in detail, but when you're installing Agent OS, the first thing you want to focus on here is your standards folder. Remember, the standards is that first layer of context that we're providing to our agents. With our standards, we're establishing how we build software here. Inside standards, we have 3 markdown files. One is called tech stack, and then code style and best practices. And so Agent OS gives you these starter templates for these 3 files, but it's really important that you customize them. You should probably overwrite and change most of the content that comes prepackaged in these files. They're intended to just be examples for you to define your own standards. That is a core principle in spec-driven development and using Agent OS. So we're going to start with the techstack.md file. This is where I want to define the most common tech stack that I use on all products that I ever develop. Now we can override these defaults on individual code bases if and when we need to, but it's much easier to just say, like, instead of my usual, let's do it this way, rather than having to redefine the whole tech stack for every single code base. So we're going to define that in one central location here in the standards folder. And you want to just include as much information as you possibly can about what's most common for you. So I'm going to paste in my customizations. I prepared these off camera. They're somewhat similar to what comes out of the box in the starter template for TechStack.md, but my defaults are a little bit different. I use a Ruby on Rails based stack. So, all these other details are unique to me. You'll want to customize your go-to, no matter which language, no matter which framework, no matter which hosting provider, how your deployments work. All that stuff should be unique to you and your preferences. Let's move over to the codestyle.md. So codestyle.md is where you want everything about how you want your code to look on the page. That can include indentation, naming conventions, how you want to structure your HTML markup. In my case, I use Tailwind CSS, and I use sort of a unique multi-line organization of my Tailwind CSS classes like that. I find it helpful, and it's part of the template if you want to use it. Maybe some notes on how and when you want to have code comments in your code and how those should be formatted. Now, again, I have my own customized code style that I prepared off camera. I'm going to paste that in right now. Okay, let's move on into best practices. Again, this is just a suggested starter template. This is maybe the most important thing for you to customize because you will have your own best practices, your own opinions across all of your code bases, or maybe the way that your whole organization works. This is a little bit different from code style. This is more about strategic development best practices. So out of the box, we have some suggested best practices, but again, these might be different from yours. These are actually pretty similar to the best practices that I use in my system. So, I want to instruct agents to, in general, just try to keep it simple, implement code in as fewest lines as possible, avoid over-engineering. I like to really optimize for readability, prioritize code clarity over micro optimizations. And of course, I can and I will always review these choices that an agent might make before it implements these things. But again, these are like my defaults. Like just think the way that I think about these things in general. That's the whole point of the standards file. Okay, so that is the standards piece of this, and that's essentially the base installation. That's now done. But now it's a question of which tools do I actually use? Now, if you've watched all the other videos on my channel, you know that I'm a heavy user of both Claude Code and Cursor, and we have specific instructions on a few additional installation steps if you're using Claude Code and or if you're using Cursor, and also some notes on any other tools you might be using, whether it's Windsurf or anything else, right? So I'm going to go down to the Claude Code installation instructions. Again, we have a one-liner script that you can run, and I'm going to run that in just a second. You can review what that's going to do, or you can do the manual instructions here. So let's go ahead and run that. So again, I'm still looking at my home folder. This is going to install some stuff into the home directory on our system. So I just pasted that one-liner that I got from here into here, and I'm just going to run that. So Agent OS Claude Code setup, and let's see what it did. So in my home folder, in my Claude folder, it did a few things. First, it installed a claude.md file. This is at the system level. We're not inside of a project or a code base yet. This is still in my home directory. So if I look at this, the way that we've structured this for Agent OS is to have your Claude MD file reference the files that are inside your Agent OS folder, right? So this is how we make them callable or findable by Claude Code, is by referencing them here inside of Claude MD. We start these with the ampersand. This points to your home folder, Agent OS. These are your standards for tech stack, code style, best practices. If you end up adding more files into your standards, which is perfectly fine to do, you'll just want to make sure that you're also referencing those, somewhere in here in Claude MD file. When it comes to running instructions, which we're going to get into when we're initializing new products or analyzing an existing product, planning new features, executing tasks, we're telling Claude, you can find all of your instructions by navigating over to these instructions. It's almost like just pulling them right into your Claude MD file. We're giving it a little bit more context, and we're telling it that you have these commands. So that's the other thing that was just installed. Inside our Claude folder, we've added a few custom / commands for Claude. Again, this is on the system level. So now we have 4 commands here. We've got analyze product, create spec, execute tasks, and plan product. Now, you'll notice that there's not much in here, right? All they do is they refer to the instructions that live inside of your Agent OS folder. The reason why it's designed that way is that we can use the same instructions for both Claude Code and Cursor and any other tool that you're using, as long as all those tools, wherever they store their custom commands, we want those to refer to our centralized instructions that live inside of our system's Agent OS folder. So that's the whole concept of how Agent OS gets installed on your system, right? So now they're available to Claude Code. Now, I also use Cursor. This is Cursor, and I do often use Cursor's agent and chat window over here. So I'm also going to want to have the same set of commands available to me, whether I'm prompting in Cursor's chat or in Claude Code. But Cursor rules would typically live inside of your project's code base. And this is something I actually don't really like about Cursor. They do have a system level Cursor rules system, which lives inside of your Cursor settings. You can go to rules and memories, but I sort of wish that Cursor had something more like Claude Code where we can just manage it in a set of markdown files on our system. They don't really have that. So we do have instructions on how to install everything for Cursor, but we're just going to wait until we're inside of our actual product's code base to put them into the Cursor rules folder. So actually, I'm going to hop over to this other project, and I have already initiated a new Rails application. In my case, I use Rails. Now, Agent OS can be installed into an existing code base. I'm going to show you that in just a minute. I'll tell you more about the product that I'm starting to build right now. But when starting a new product, I tend to just initiate the new application like I always have over the years. I don't need to have Claude Code or Cursor actually initiate the application. In my case, Rails new. So I'm inside that folder now. And now that I'm inside of this project, I can go ahead with the Cursor specific instructions, which are here. Cursor setup. Again, we have a one-liner setup script that I'm going to use. I can review what that's going to do. or we have manual instructions for cursor as well. So let's go ahead and run that one. Now, cursor is a little bit different from the Claude code instructions in that I do need to be inside the folder for the product code base that I'm working in. So I'm inside that now, and I'm going to paste the one-liner script. So inside of this product's code base, it just added a cursor folder, or if it already existed, it would have found it. And then inside the rules folder, it created 4 rules. And those are the same 4 commands that we installed into the global Claude code commands. So analyze product, create spec, execute tasks, and plan product. And again, all of these are pretty simple. We're just referring to the instructions that live inside of my system's Agent OS instructions. And so now let's see both Claude code and cursor and see if we have access to these commands. So I'm going to fire up Claude and I can hit the / command. And there we go. We've got analyze product, create spec, execute tasks, and plan product. And I'm going to walk through these as we get started on this project here in this video. And let's see if they're available to me in cursor. So in the cursor chat, I'll go to add context. Under rules, we've got analyze product, create spec, execute tasks, plan product. So these are all ready to use. So let's start using them. Okay, so we're going to start working on a new product. And for that, I'm going to run the plan product command. And we're going to look at that in detail in just a second. But before I do, I know that a lot of you are working on established products that are already in development and you have established code bases. So Agent OS also comes with a command called analyze product. So in that case, if you're installing Agent OS into an existing code base that's been around for a little while, maybe it's midway through development, you can use analyze product instead of plan product. And what analyze product is going to do is it's going to essentially run everything that plan product will do. But in addition, it's going to actually analyze your current code base, see what's already there, see what kind of progress you've already made, and it'll document the progress so far so that you can just sort of pick up from here and move forward with Agent OS in your workflow. So in our case, we're going to use plan product, and I'm going to hop over to my actual code base for the product that I'm going to start. I'm calling it Tube Planner. And again, I could use Cursor or Claude Code because I did install it for either one. I'm going to go ahead and use Claude Code, and I'm going to use the plan product command. Now I can press tab and start giving it some details about what this new product is all about right here if I want to, but I could also just keep it simple and just run the command and see what happens. Okay, so as we can see, Claude Code is following my instructions for how I want to plan out a new product. And according to that planning process, the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to ask me this list of questions, right? First, like, what is the main idea for the product? List a couple of the key features. Who are the target users and use case? What's the tech stack preferences? Do I want to use my defaults or deviate from those at all? And this last one, it's also asking me if the application has already been initialized. And I added that in so that Claude doesn't try to start up a new application since I've already done that step. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and answer these questions. So one, the main idea for the product is going to be an app that captures ideas for my YouTube channel. Each idea should have notes, an ability to draft multiple titles with the help of AI. And I want the ability to track ideas through their different stages of production. It asked me who the target users and use cases are. I'm just going to keep it super simple. I'll just say me. And by the way, I might have more notes and concepts for a new product that I'm working on. And I can share all of that here if I want to, or I can keep it as simple and stripped down as I want to, because Claude Code is going to go ahead and generate a very detailed plan that I'm going to review in just a second. So it asked me about tech stack preferences. There are a few things that I want to deviate from my defaults here. So I'm going to say my usuals, except. So in this case, it'll just be a simple app that only I will be using. So I don't want to install user auth. I also told it that on this one, I'm not going to be using the components library that I usually use. And just yes on the last question. Has the application already been initialized? Yep. So now it's going to go off and create a highly detailed product plan. And we're going to let that do its thing. Now, while that's working, why don't we look under the hood a little bit on Agent OS and take a look at what this plan product command is actually doing. It's referring to the instructions for plan product. By the way, I'm back in my home folder now while that is working over here. Okay, so in my home folder in Agent OS, we've got instructions, and it's currently running through the instructions that we have built into planproduct.md. Now, you obviously have access to all these instructions. You can review them in detail. You can even tweak them if you want to. Unlike the standards, which I highly recommend you do customize to yours, the instructions, they are good to go as is. You don't really need to customize anything in here unless you really want to change some steps in your workflow, which is fine. But just know that these instructions have been carefully crafted and they are ready to use. So the way that they are structured, if you just look at them from a high level, of course, is that they are a mix of Markdown and XML formatting. And that's actually like a really interesting sort of hybrid between Markdown syntax and XML. While I was developing this, I was using Claude to really get the formatting nailed down for this. It's pretty interesting how it sort of just creates its own naming conventions for these XML tags. These aren't keywords or anything, but they all make sense in the context of the instructions. So it's just a very systematic, step-by-step process, starting from step 1, step 2. We're giving it some file structure. We're giving it specific sets of instructions. We're telling it exactly how to structure language in the files that it's going to generate for us with some, template variables and whatnot. So, you can dig into these files in more detail, but let's actually see what the output actually was. So now I'm back in my project code base here. And I can see that Claude Code has finished up the task of planning out the product. So let's see what it came up with. So now inside of the code base, we now have an Agent OS folder in there. And inside that, we have a product folder. Inside the product folder, we've got 4 Markdown files: decisions, mission, roadmap, and tech stack. Let's start with tech stack. It took most of this from my defaults, but it did make some customizations based on my instructions. For example, it did note that we are not going to be doing any user authentication. In this case, one of the features is going to be an AI-generated title generator for video ideas. So it added in this part of the tech stack for OpenAI API. So I'm pretty happy with the tech stack for this code base. Let's move on into, I like to look at mission next. So the mission MD is, of course, the mission of the product. It generated this pitch for Tube Planner, the name of this product, and then it's listing out the users. So the structure of this mission document is all built into the actual plan product instruction. This is how I like to think about a new product's mission. It's not just letting Claude Code, dream up its own mission for what it thinks a mission should look like. I had very specific instructions for how I want my products to be planned, with like a very simple like elevator pitch. I want to list who the product is for, who are the primary target customers, what are those user personas. I like to think about that. And then I like to get into the problem and what our solution is. Like, what is it that we're actually building? A good product should be solving very specific problems and actually deliver a unique solution. Then we get into the differentiators, also something very important. So it just drafted these up based on its best guesses. So I'm going to go in and actually review all these little details to make sure that the mission is actually aligned with what my vision is for this product. Down here, we go into core features. We're not yet actually in the roadmap. We're certainly not into actual tasks to build. This is really just high-level core features of what it is that we're building here to get a high-level picture of the product. Okay, then we get into roadmap.md. So it did generate an actual roadmap with a couple of phases. And inside these phases, we've got must-have features and should-have features and some dependencies. This is just a high-level roadmap. We're not even up to the specs layer yet. We're just going to be able to track this roadmap as we build out individual features, which we'll get into next. Here, we are still within the high-level product planning area. It's sort of graded each roadmap item as like small, medium, or large. I don't really see any larges in here. Oh yeah, there's a large. And so a really important part of spec-driven development in general and Agent OS is to spend a lot of time in this phase, planning the product, making sure that every line of these planning documents accurately reflects what it is we actually want to build. We want to front load all the effort here in this phase before the agent actually gets to work. That's the key to ensuring that our AI agents are actually carrying out the work as we expect it to and really boosting that success rate. All right, finally, under product, it also created this decisions.md file. I like this file because it serves as a log. So it starts off this file with basically the first decision that is made, which is the initial product planning. And each decision that gets logged here, gets a date, gets a status, some details about the decision, the context, alternatives that were considered, and the rationale and the consequences for the actual decision that was made. So over time, as we develop features in our roadmap, which we're going to get to next, AgentOS is going to analyze the features that we're building against our high-level roadmap. And if something is deviating off of the roadmap, it's going to suggest to us, hey, it might be time to document a decision in our decisions log. And it'll ask permission to do that, and then it'll do that. So we have all this infrastructure as part of the system, but it's the agents themselves that will handle the heavy lifting of actually writing these things up and logging everything and checking things off in the roadmap as we finish certain items in the roadmap. It's going to do that for us. And it's our job to just review and maintain oversight over the whole process. All right, so now that we've laid all the groundwork, we've got our standards layer of context, we've got the product layer of context. Now let's actually get into spec-driven development and start creating some specs. So I'm going to use Claude Code again to develop the first feature in our roadmap. And the first step of that is to write a really good spec for this feature. Now, how do we do that with AgentOS? I could just use my / command to create spec, and I could give it some details about what I want to build, like what is the feature that I want to build, and then it can use our create spec to plan out that feature. Or we can keep it even simpler, and I'm just going to ask Claude Code, what's next? And so Claude Code is going into the roadmap that we've already documented here, and it's going to find the next feature that we haven't built yet. In this case, it's the first feature. So it says, based on your roadmap, the next step is to work on phase 1, core foundation, specifically the first item, idea creation. And then it asks me, would you like me to create the spec? And all I need to do is say, yep. So just keeping it really low friction for me. I don't need to type or over explain many things. It's all already documented. Claude or whatever agent I'm using today, it's going to get everything that it needs, and it's going to generate a plan that I can review and I can tweak as needed. And while that's working, again, let's look under the hood and see what this actual create spec instruction looks like. It looks a lot like the plan product instruction in terms of formatting. It's a mix of Markdown and XML. This one has quite a few steps. We start with step 1 and it goes all the way down into step 15. Again, I think it's really interesting to read through the way that these instructions are structured. So for example, here on step 9, when it's going to create the API specification, only if API changes are needed. And then it's sort of defining a decision tree for itself with some if-else statements. So, there's just a very logical order of operations in the instructions that are built into AgentOS. Now, again, it's not actually building anything yet. It's just creating the spec, the instructions, and all the specifications and the requirements for the feature that it's going to build. And we're going to look at those and review them in detail before we give the agent the go-ahead to proceed. Again, we are front-loading the effort and the resources on the planning phase of everything. Now, if you've watched my previous videos on using Claude Code obviously does have its own planning features. AgentOS really takes that to another whole level, and I'm going to show you that right here. So it looks like Claude Code is finished creating the spec for this feature. And so inside the AgentOS folder, which is inside of our product code base, now we have a specs folder. And inside this specs folder is where we're going to have a folder for every spec. So as the project grows, we're going to have many of these dated folders inside of specs. It got today's date and it created a folder based on what we're building here, which is the idea creation feature. I'm going to open that up, and we've got a sub-specs folder and the spec itself, spec.md. Let's take a look at that. And so here is the specs document. You might be familiar with a project requirements document or product requirements document. We're calling it a spec requirements document. These things go by many different names, but essentially it's the overview of the feature that we're about to build. We've got some user stories in here. And again, like the structure of this spec is all built into the instructions from Agent OS. It is a very specific approach that I'm taking here from the overview into what is actually in the scope in terms of the features here. And I wanted it to list the things that are out of scope. So we're specifically instructing the agent to like, yes, I want you to build these things, and I don't want you to build these things. So just being very explicit about all that. These are the expected deliverables. And so this is all still very high level. And I'm going to review this in detail and make sure it's exactly how I want the specification for this feature to be. But then we can open up subspecs. And it created an API spec with some information about some new endpoints that it's going to develop. We're going to develop a controller, a couple new routes. So all that is documented, and I can review it to make sure that I'm seeing everything that I expect to see in an API spec. Same thing with database schema. It's going to create some new migrations, some new columns in the database. I can see exactly how it's going to name those. So I'm just seeing a preview of everything that's going to be built before it gets built. Like I didn't spend the time writing all this up. The agent did. All I need to do is give it a look and fix anything that I think is out of place. Technical spec. This is a little bit more detail on how this feature is going to be designed. And it's also listing out a few different approaches and the one that it actually selected to go with. So again, I can review all these and I can sort of weigh the pros and cons. It gave me the rationale for why it's going to go with that particular approach. So now that we have the spec all planned out and documented, now it's time to actually convert that into an actual checklist that the agent can follow to actually go ahead and build. And it asked me to review the spec. Let me know if there are any changes before I go ahead and create the task breakdown. So I'll just say, good to go. And you can say anything that's sort of an affirmative to let it go forward. Okay, so that's all set. It just created one more file inside of our spec folder for this feature that we're building, and that's called tasks.md. And here it is. So first it's referencing the spec document that it already created. So that's like at the top of the task list. And that, of course, spawns into all these subspecs. But here is the actual task list, task 1, and the subtasks under that. And again, I'm going to review the task list in detail before I give it the go-ahead. Our spec planning is designed to take a test-driven development approach, where the first subtask in most of these is to write tests, and the last substep is to verify that all the tests pass. Now, if all of this looks good to me, and I think it does, my next step would just be to respond to the agent by saying yes or go ahead, right? And now by default, if I just say yes, go ahead, it's only going to tackle task number 1. So it's going to tackle one entire step and all of its substeps. But if I want to bite off a little bit more than that, I can say, go ahead and do steps 1, 2, and 3 or something like that, or go ahead and tackle all of them. I think in general, it's better to keep them a little bit tighter, but if one task is small enough, then it's perfectly fine to, tackle 2 or 3 or 4 at the same time. So I think in this case, I'm going to tell it to go ahead and do tasks 1, 2, and 3. By the way, while Claude Code is working, I can look at the tasks.md file, and it's already checking off tasks that it's done. So I can see that it's already gotten through all of task number 1, and now it's moving on to task number 2. And let's see how we're doing. Oh, yeah, it looks like it's all done with task number 2, and it should just be doing 3, and then we'll see where we're at. By the way, I have another video on the channel on how to multitask with Claude Code and have it run multiple instances of Claude Code on different Git work trees. So we can use Agent OS to have Claude Code work on multiple tasks, multiple things in the roadmap at the same time using multitasking. So you might want to check out that video after this one. And like I always like to do with Claude Code, and this is built into the Agent OS instruction, is to run this audio bell when it's close to finished with a task. And here we go. The task is all done. And by the way, I should have mentioned this earlier. The whole time it was running that task, it was actually following my instruction for execute task. If I go back into the instructions, that's here, execute tasks, and you can review that. Again, it's a big one. It includes like committing to Git, creating a PR. It also includes instructions on how I want it to present the finished task to me at the end. So it tells me what's been done, which it typically does, but I also asked it to tell me what is ready for me to go ahead and test in the browser. It says that I should be able to navigate to the app root and hit new idea and enter a title and click create title to save. So let's actually start up the server. Here's our little app that I just created. Of course, I didn't really do too much work on the design or any instruction there, so it created something kind of basic, but it looks like I can create a new idea for a video. By the way, if you have ideas that you would like to see me cover on my YouTube channel, let me know in the comments so that I can put it into my new idea capture app here and plan it out and get it published. And there we go. It actually works. And what it told me is ready to test in the live browser actually is ready for me to test in the live browser, as we just saw. So that's pretty cool. Now, of course, I can review all of the code. Like here's the ideas controller. There's probably an idea model. Yep, here it is. We've got idea test. These are all the tests that it wrote. And let's actually run the Rails tests to see if they pass. And looks like it does. We've got all green marks there. So I'd say that this was a successful run with my agent, thanks to Agent OS. The real power of spec-driven development is it gets better over time. And Agent OS is designed to evolve with you. So as you use it, you'll spot patterns, where your agents excel, where they stumble. Each refinement makes your agents more aligned with how you actually build. This isn't about perfection on day one. It's about building a system that learns your style and delivers the results that you expect every time. So when you're ready to adopt this method, you can get Agent OS for free along with all the documentation at buildermethods.com. And while you're there, grab my free Builder Briefing. It's a 5-minute read that I send to professionals who want to stay ahead of the curve on building with AI. Now, subscribe to the channel. I'm releasing videos like this one every week. And drop me a comment. Tell me how Agent OS is working for you, and tell me any questions you have that you'd like to see me cover here on the channel. Let's keep building.